to the National Children and Youth Consultation on Disaster Risk Reduction. Dahil dito sa NCYC,
all eyes on children and youth.
Today we expand our advocacy to focus specifically on children's unique needs in climate policy.
The 30 children and 21 youth from the various regions of the Philippines and child and youth-led organizations gathered on July 17 to 18, 2024 to discuss our role in the climate crisis and disaster risk reduction and management, or DRRM.
Our realities, voices, and actions are essential for effective and inclusive disaster risk management and climate justice.
We acknowledge both of our vulnerability to disasters, but we also see ourselves as powerful agents and catalysts of change, and thus commit to contribute to community resilience. For each of the Sendai Framework priorities per action and the Paris Agreement, we, the children and youth, are committed to the following. Priority 1. Understanding disaster risk, active engagement in making risk assessment and community-based DRRM activities inclusive and participative.
Second, articulating the challenges of the children and youth face in addressing DRR and climate-related issues.
Fact-checking and information dissemination using various forms of media to reach even the most remote areas and vulnerable populations.
Promotion of youth-led initiatives and organizations for enhancing understanding of DRRM and the climate crisis.
Priority 2. Strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. Participation in policy-making processes at local and national levels through various platforms such as the barangay, Sangguniang Kabataan, community, and schools. Support of climate justice legislation to hold industries accountable, including supporting the passage of Climate Accountability Act or CLIMA Bill.
Strengthening youth-centered organizations for advocacy and collaboration.
Priority 3.
Investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. Active participation in community-based DRRM activities, especially those that capacitate children and the youth.
Advocating for investment in resilient and inclusive infrastructures for schools, hospital, and evacuation centers.
Strengthening and leading community-based programs for vulnerable sectors to promote inclusivity.
Priority 4. Enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Organize child and youth-led DRRM and climate resilience programming and planning which meaningfully engage adults and key stakeholders. Participation in disaster preparedness activities in schools and communities and ensuring that they are informed by a child and youth lens. Maximize platforms and systems for DRR support and climate impact mitigation. At the same time, we call upon the duty bearers, the government, including civil society and the private sector to Priority 1. Understanding disaster risk.
We call upon duty bearers to invest in DRRM and climate education mainstream into the curriculum and develop materials in local languages that integrate environmental protection into disaster risk understanding.
Ensure inclusivity and accessibility to information using innovative and inclusive media to effectively communicate disaster risk and climate action for the youth. Equip rural areas for disaster resilience. Incorporate the unique needs and experiences of children into vulnerable assessments. Priority 2. Strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. Provide accessible and response services to vulnerable groups. Deliberately and programmally involve the youth in policy development. Establish community engagement and feedback and response mechanisms as part of a larger effort for accountability, transparency, and meaningful participation.
Institutionalize sustainable practices that address environmental degradation.
Create and enforce stricter policies that hold companies and carbon majors accountable for their role in the climate crisis.
Protect child and youth climate advocates and activists.
Priority 3. Investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. Provide livelihood options that are diverse, sustainable, environmentally friendly, and ensure that investment have no significant adverse environmental impacts.
Invest in resilient and disaster-proof public infrastructure and systems, particularly for the vulnerable.
Limit the use of schools as evacuation centers in accordance with the law. Consider climate taxation as part of the corporate social responsibility. Priority 4. Enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Balance economic and environmental and social goals in response, rehabilitation, and recovery while adopting a whole government approach.
Strengthen the education system through a united approach, addressing the learning crisis exacerbated by COVID-19 and the intensified impacts of disasters. Invest in mental health support for youth, including in youth-led peer-to-peer services. Institutionalize resilience and safety measures in public infrastructure, especially in making evacuation centers cater to the needs of the vulnerable.
Guarantee the relocation programs provide equitable access to essential services. We, the children and youth of the Philippines, pledge to pursue inclusive DRRM and climate action in support of the Sendai Framework and Paris Agreement. We urge our duty bearers, the government, supported by partners and wider communities to provide us with opportunities, platforms, and services that contribute meaningfully to building a just, safe, and resilient country and world for our generations to come.